Okay, so today we are going to be using Conte crayons to make a landscape. So I've got some supplies out. I've got my actual Conte crayon set. So this is an assorted one. They come in a variety of tones and colors. This is your basic black, white, and a brown and a almost like, I guess, rust color. It's called Sanguine and Bistre. If you're looking for the exact one, number 2454 and 2450. And then your black and white. So those are what I'm going to be using today. I also have a regular charcoal pencil and white charcoal pencil, which I'm going to use to add some highlights and shadows. I've got my tortillon, which I'm going to be used for blending as well as tissue available. I have my pencil, which I can use to sketch if I need it, as well as a reference photo. So Conte crayons are a little different than probably what you used before. They're similar to charcoal and similar to chalk pastel, but different at the same time. So chalk pastel blends very easily and has a tendency to almost like smudge and basically leave like really soft lines, whereas the Conte crayon has a lot more descriptive line. So it'll stay put a little better and it can be straighter and thinner, similar to the way a charcoal pencil would handle, except you get the ability for these to take up more of a surface area, which is nice. I call them Conte crayons. You might have heard them as Conte sticks. They're named after the inventor, who is Nicholas Conte, who I believe actually invented the modern pencil as well. But it's basically a mixture of graphite, so what you find in actual pencil, or charcoal, depending on which kind you buy, and then a wax binder and some sort of clay base. And then it could be any mixture of that. And then they can control how hard they are. So like this one here, my white is a 2B. A 2B is on the softer side, so it goes up to about like an 8B. So you can see my regular charcoal is a 6B, which is extra soft, just to give you an idea of that. But they're used basically for sketching out really quick areas. A lot of artists will use them in their sketchbooks. They make for really nice portraits because they've got that warm tone to them. And they're nice if you want to work with black and white and studies and values, but then also add some variation with colors. And they do make really colorful ones now, but prior to modern times, they were all done in these darker colors. So I pulled some examples offline just so you could see the differences. So this one's obviously got some man-built elements, but you can see how they got some really descriptive lines, which aren't really possible to do with chalk pastel. This one is done in all of that sanguine color. You can stick to one tone if you like. This one's got a mix of all four of those. It's a good landscape. This one hasn't really been blended much. So it's just a straight up line. So this would be out of someone's sketchbook. And then this one's got some natural and man-made elements. So I'm not going to show you this part of the video because you can see it in 1,000 other videos or just figure it out. But really all I did was I took a piece of paper, I taped it down to a drawing board here. I left the tape here so I could see the border because I want to have a small, fresh piece of white all the way around, and that'll help me mat it later. So I've got that. And then I started just by taking the black and I sketched out really quickly a mountain range. So I'm using this as a reference. I'm not necessarily copying this. I just want some different images to pull from. So I've got my mountain range in the back. I've got a closer one here. This is my foreground, and that's my other foreground. So I'm going to turn that a little more mountain than just trees. And then I wanted it framed up. So I've got my big tree there, my two other there that are going to frame it. And then I'm going to have some sporadically throughout. So that's what I started with. And we'll get into the actual adding of color next. Okay, so I'm going to be starting with the background. So the background, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to actually go through and do a reductive drawing. I'm going to start with my black. I'm just going to start by laying down some color. And it's not going to be a nighttime sky, but I'm starting with this because I want to make a gray tone out of it. You can see this moves around similar to your chalk pastel or charcoal would. So you can force it into certain directions. does pick up sometimes the line of the actual material itself. So in there, so you can spend, hours at making this really, really soft and get rid of every single mark. For the purposes of this video, so I don't spend the whole time on the sky, I'm just going to sort of take it as it is. And then I'm going to be taking my eraser. I've got two different types of erasers here. I've got a very fine point one, as well as on my pencil. And I've also got this bigger one. I'm going to start by putting in some of these clouds. So this is the part that is considered reductive. So by going through and taking away the pigment, I'm reducing the paper. And that is what's giving me the reductive drawing. So I like to work this way a lot because it's so much faster than trying to go in and make every cloud its own thing. So it gives little variations inside of it depending on how hard I'm pushing down on the actual medium itself. Okay, so now that I've got some basic variation, like I'm pretty happy with the way this part came out, like those rolling clouds. That area could use some work, but we'll move on for the purposes of this. I'm going to be switching colors now. So I'm going to go into the next color, which I think this is the penguin. Start putting in roughly where I had that mountain. I think that's about right. You notice I use the edge a lot when I'm trying to just get a base coat. Makes it a lot easier to get in color. At least some natural like texture. So I like when I'm doing a landscape to get right in the base coat, like some different variations. It's not always in the spot I want it to be, which can be pretty frustrating because you got to erase it out and add it back in. But you can also switch the direction of this. That helps sort of spread out those blended areas. All right, so there's my back one. I want this area to be darker. Just going to sort of add some random spots that do get darker. And I don't always blend everything out. A lot of people sit there and blend every single part, but I want some of that texture to really stick in there.
Can I have your attention, please? Just a reminder, we have not dismissed anybody.
Okay, so I've got that part of the mountain filled in. I'm going to go back through with some darker tones. I just want to add some black in there, so I really want this to stand out and blend up. And I'll mix with that color right on there. You don't really want to overdo it until you start to see this whole thing as a whole and decide what needs to go dark, what needs to go light. I like to start out with one. It just gives me an idea of like what one piece of this is going to look like. All right, this can be my dark side of the mountain right here. That's going to be the light. And we can also push in some of the idea of the snow building up. Okay, so for the next mountain, which is going to be coming through here, and bring this up a little higher than it originally was. Let's blend those out a little bit. And some of this is going to have trees over it and stuff built in, so I'm not concerned with it being necessarily perfect because it will act as a background for a lot. I'm really just trying to get some color in to start. Let's go back through some black. Oh, one of the things people ask you is, does it erase? Yes, it will pull off some layers. If I wanted to come through and do some of the snow and stuff with the pencil eraser, you can get rid of some, and then you can go back in with your white. If you want to pull out a crisper white. All right, I think it's time to introduce. Oh, let's put a little more black in here, sorry. Some of our other brown. So far we've used mostly this rust color. I'm gonna pull in some of these other brown in here. Sort of blend the two up. And it works really similar to the black, except it's got a warmer feeling to it.
At this time, all students may be dismissed. Have a wonderful weekend.
All right, and then we're going to put in this foreground with all the brown. This is the mountain ridge that the trees are going to be on, which are going to be done blacks and whites. Maybe some of the reddish tone too. I'm going to layer a little bit of the red so it feels like it's connected in some way. Okay, so I just realized that might not have actually been on the camera, so I got to bump this up a little bit. So what I was just doing is putting in this darker brown towards the bottom here, mixing in a little bit of the other color, the rust. We basically got both tones in there. And we're going to go through with Black and darken up here. Okay, and we're just going to go across randomly again, get some different tones in there. Okay, now we're ready to get into some detail.
Please. Apparently, Eve Poultry was upset that the music was turned off abruptly, so I'm going to play one last song.
Okay, so sorry, we've had a lot of announcements, so this video is all over the place. Like I was saying, so I just put in some of this darker brown into the bottom here, which is going to be pretty much covered up with foliage all throughout, so I'm not too concerned about it. As I look at this, I'm thinking that the sky could use like a little light dusting of some of this rust color too, just so that it's not completely black and white. So to give it that warm look. So if at any point you want to do that, you just pick up some color on a tissue. I'm just going to lightly dust it through. And what this does is it gives you some of that rust color into the sky. That's going to sort of balance out the tone so it's not so cold and it picks up that warm vibe that the rest of the piece has. So that's always a trick to sort of change the colors. I know it doesn't look like much on camera, but in person you can see a big difference in there. All right, next we're going to be starting the trees. So for these trees, I had guidelines that I went through. I'm just going to come in and redraw those. So there's my one guideline for that side, and I had another one over here. This one stops behind there, and there's one close by it. So the main tree right here. One in the back. A couple through there. All right, so there's my main trees I'm going to be working from. So I'm going to try this with the black first. I'm basically going to start going over some of this area and pulling out. This one's probably the most sparse out of all of them. And this obviously should get a little bigger as you go down the tree itself. It's almost like a silhouette. We're just playing around with some of the shapes. I'm definitely not really following the picture anymore. I'm sort of keeping it the sparse look. It's a lot fuller on here, which is fine. You can take those artistic liberties. I might thicken this up and go out a little bit more, so increase the size. Go back through and make sure there's still some spacing. And add a little bit of this burnt color on top. Some of that. Now the picture's got a small highlight on the tree. I'm going to try to do some of that through here. What that does is it pulls out the stem from in there. And if it was snowing, I'd be adding some on there as well. So that's the gist of that tree. So you can switch up the colors. Some of these trees back here don't even have really anything on them. Those ones look dead, which is fine. 4. You can also use your charcoal pencil. So I completely forgot I'm right-handed, so working on this side first was a big mistake. So I'm going to just cover that up. Another trick, so that while I work on this one over here, I don't smudge my one I just did. This one's a little more full than that one. It's eventually going to connect with this tree over here as well. There's not really much of a highlight on this one, but I'm gonna just bake it in a couple spots. This one would definitely benefits from some added rust coloring into some of these leaves, give it those definition. Trees over here. So these ones are actually lighter. I'm gonna try doing this in brown and adding some black in. We'll just see what the difference looks like. I can always switch it back. Yeah, so that's pretty light compared to my black one. So now that I've got the brown in there, I'm gonna go back through. Just try to darken it up. So this is blending while I'm doing it. So you can see it's starting to get a little lighter than my regular black, which is good. That's what I wanted. Same to this one. Just gotta throw some color down first and let the black be the lines. It'll pull in the brown as it goes. Start to make those other colors. All right, see our trees back here. These are also a little lighter tone. Oops, wrong one. And I think what I say with most of if I have the time, let's say here I could spend half an hour on each tree, just making sure every leaf and everything is perfect on each one. But we're just doing what we can with what we got time-wise. So just to give you the gist of each one. Okay, so there's pretty much most of the trees I'm going to be putting in. Next, I'm going to be putting in some of this other foliage there. So you can see that's actually a lighter color, which means I'm going to start by erasing out some of the stuff. You can actually pick up some lines, and I realize those are trees, but I'm going to treat it more like a grass type of area. almost like pulling out the color. Remember, this is the reductive style. It's going to look more like a mountain range, like a grassy knoll area. Now I'll give that a little variety in color. Probably should have done this before the trees, actually, and the black would have covered up some of that. And then for these ones even closer, longer, brighter. You'll see this also started tied together. The sky, which is pretty much all light color. So this is balancing it all out. And I can go back in with my really light color. Add some variations. We want areas that are a little darker too. Also have sort of that patchwork. Okay, so that is a very, very basic, quick explanation of how to use the Conte Crayon. You could spend hours and hours working on the size of small, trying to get exactly the perfect technique in each thing and get the textures and really pull out some of the detail and like the snow and these mountain and the ridges versus just sort of laying the color down and letting it do its thing. You can really control where all this goes into the valley and add in every part of the foliage. But that should be a pretty good mix of all the stuff you might be choosing within your own. I will take a picture of this too. Actually, let's pull it off now. All right, hopefully I don't get the white ruined. So I'll pull this off so you can see what it looks like with the border. So it does make a pretty big difference. It's all said and done. All right, so you can see that nice crisp white edge next to it. Did rip the paper a little bit, but oh, just get the black in here before I pull this off. Oh, almost. This tape worked really well, I guess. Okay, and there is our final Conte Crayon.